first one, mate.
Yeah, I'll do it. I would do, but I'm talking. Otherwise, if I get it, I'll never get up. Always be tempted by it. I've done a total wipeout. At the start, it runs.
Might do that again.
Yeah.
Right, hello everyone, great to see you. Thanks for coming down. Welcome to Figure Out Digital Search Seminar. In case you missed me, introduce myself again, we're forcing you to interact with each other. My name is John Fortgang, I'm the editor of Figure Out Digital magazine. Here it is, this is the current issue, lots of copies of this kicking around today. So you pick one up and take one away. Digital transformation, that's what all about. Search Day, that's what this afternoon it's all about, that's what we're discussing today. We've got a team of experts on hand. And as usual, they'll be taking us through some case studies, sharing their own insights and experience. I think it's going to be a really useful session for you guys. Before we kick off, as is traditional, I'll just race through a couple of housekeeping points. So first up, there is wireless connection here at the Hospital Club, so if you need to jump online, you should be able to, no password, so if you spot that Hospital Club wireless connection, you should be able to get on there. Hashtag today is FigDigSearch, again, just as I was mentioning in the other room. If you want to tweet your 2050 New Year's resolutions involving search, if you want to tweet any questions, tell us what search is going to mean for you in your industry over the next year or so. Please do FigDigSearch, and then what we'll do, if there's time, if possible, we might get some of our speakers to respond to some of those things at the end of the day. You should all have a delegate back. That will tell you a bit more detail who's doing what and when, of course, in the afternoon. Twitter handles, all that stuff, all that's there. Also there's feedback form that's there. So as the afternoon goes there, you just jot down your thoughts on each of our speakers, and that obviously helps us improve these events, make them more relevant for you guys. We'll cover those up at the end of the day. All the presentations are filmed, so if you do find you miss anything, don't worry, all of this stuff will be available to the Figure Out Digital site over the next few days. That includes the slide decks, so you've got videos and slide decks all available on the Figure Out Digital site. Lose, if you need them, just out there on the right, so the corridor that just brings you into the screening room is just there on the right. There's a cloak room down there as well, if you need to drop anything off. And we will take a break. So we've got 4 speakers today, so we'll take a break at 3:30. Back in there, go and grab a tea and a coffee and have a chat. And we'll wrap up today at 5 o'clock. Now I know this is kind of National Office Party Day, but hopefully you can come and join us for a drink afterwards. Anyway, we're upstairs in the loft for an hour or so, so you can join us for a drink at the end of the day, if you possibly can. Right then, that's enough of all that. Let's get going. Kicking off, we have Martin Dillon. Martin is director of Barracuda Digital. Google now and then changes for the last 10 years. Please welcome Martin Dillon from Barracuda Digital.
Thank you very much, folks. Good afternoon. Good to see so many people here. I'm going to try and give a little bit of a whistle-stop tour, I guess, of the last 10 years and a bit, actually, in terms of Google and how it's changed, but more particularly as SEO people, how that affects us and what we do from an SEO point of view. Before I do that, the obligatory piece of corporate spiel about Barracuda, just so you know who we are if you don't already. We're a search marketing agency. That won't surprise you. That's why we're here today. We've been around since the year 2000. So, in terms of the content of my presentation and the theme, we've got a lot more than 10 years of experience of this stuff, and we've seen how it evolves through that time. There's 28 of us. We're based just down the road near Waterloo. I'd like to think we're recognised by our peers for being experienced and innovative. We've got, quite a lot of the usual agency ticks in the boxes. We're a Google partner. We were shortlisted in the UK Search Awards for the last 3 years. Interestingly, one service we've just launched is Google Business View, which are those little 360-degree tours you can get on your website, and we're now a Google partner for that. We're doing an increasing amount of that sort of work. We use a lot of technology. Some of it's our own that we've built and that's proprietary to us. Some of it is best in class. One thing that you may have seen us for, and may be useful if you haven't, is we have a tool that we've cunningly nicknamed Penguin, halfway between panda and a penguin. And basically what the Penguin tool does is it enables you to look at the impact of Google updates on your own website. So have a look at it. There's the URL there. It's completely free. And basically you hook it up to Google Analytics and it overlays your individual website traffic patterns against Panda and Penguin and other updates, so that you can see if your traffic's taken a pasting one day, whether that's related to an update or not, for example. It's completely free. We don't collect any data, so it's just a resource that hopefully will be of some use. In terms of who we work with, there's a whole scattering of names there. I won't go through them, but hopefully you get the idea. We work with a lot of people across most sectors, including those sectors that are as competitive as it gets as far as online is concerned. So that's enough about us. In terms of today and what I'm going to speak about for the next 20-25 minutes, I'm going to try and take a misty-eyed, nostalgic trip down the last 10 years of Google, mainly with a view to how the changes in Google over the last 10 years have impacted SEO. And this is really based on the experience that I've got as an individual. I've been around SEO since 2002, and they say internet years and SEO years are like dog years, so God knows how much experience that gives me. And also as an agency as well, we've been around SEO even longer, so there are people in Barracuda who have even more history than I do, would you believe? So, in terms of history of Google, I thought it'd be just quite fun to have a look backwards over the shoulder about Google and how it's evolved since the beginning, which actually wasn't very long ago. It was only 1995 that Page and Brin, who are the two founders, originally met at Stanford. So, actually this is quite recent history. And the year after that, they invented their first ever search engine. And here's a very poor screenshot. Back in that day, that had the rather less catchy name of Backrub. I think it wasn't until a couple of years later when they were chasing some investment money that they thought, actually, that's not a great name. We better think of something else. And that's where Google came from. One thing I think it's worth looking at, though, is the underlying principle of Google from day one, from that very first iteration of Backrub all the way through to today, has been this concept of PageRank that they call it. And although we talk about it less as SEOs, and the little green bar that we used to have is now no longer, actually PageRank is still the fundamental underpinning of Google and how they rank websites. Originally, it was named after Larry Page. I always thought for years that it was Page, as in web page, but actually it was named after Larry Page. And essentially, it's based on the academic citation principle, which means the more votes of confidence, the more references, the more links, in other words, a website page has, the more valid Google views it as being. Now, over the years, of course, how Google counts that and the mechanics of how those links and references are built has changed beyond all recognition, but actually that fundamental principle is still as true today as it was 10 years and then some ago. So again, another bit of nostalgia. The Google page from the year 2000 looks a bit clunky now, doesn't it? Also, if you look, it says the index contains 25 million pages. I think it's something like 50 billion and counting now. So it's transformed beyond all recognition, and you can see it's still got the mention of Stanford. It still has that sort of academic project look about it. I also thought it'd be quite fun to look at some jobs that Google were advertising in the year 2000. So this is 14 years ago. One here, I don't know how clear this is from the back of the room, but this is a job advertisement for a vice president of engineering. And this is clearly a heavyweight job. This is asking for somebody with a PhD and 10 years of experience and managing a team of 50 people or whatever. The thing I like about it is it asks you to fax in your CV, which I think is kind of ironic. And the other job, which I quite like, is their job advert from the same year for a head chef. There's some great wording. It talks about their well-travelled, refined palates and their cravings for epicureal delights. It's proper Google language, isn't it? But the kicker that I love on this is that bit at the bottom. They employed this Charlie Ayres guy, who used to be the chef for the Grateful Dead, would you believe? I think that's why he got the job. Anyway, he left 5 or 6 years later, worth $20 million because of the stock options that he took. So, he's probably the richest corporate chef in history, I suspect. So that's a little bit about the history. So, in terms of the actual product itself, in terms of the Google results page, I thought it would be interesting and a little bit fun to have a look at how that's evolved over time. So this is leaping forward a few years to 2004, and you'll see, in some ways it looks quite different to how it does today, but actually some of the functionality of Google that we see today is beginning to appear. So you've got your AdWords, clearly appearing here. You've got some local search starting to appear here, but the majority of that page is obviously assigned to those 10 blue results. The old school organic listing is very much the dominant feature on this page. If you fast forward to today for the same query, you'll see how much things have changed. So these local results have expanded dramatically. The local pack here and down here is taking up much more of that page. You've got AdWords at the top, which are now labelled as AdWords, but taking much more of that page. And actually, the old school SEO results, the organic search results, have actually been compressed, into this little section here. So you'll see that things other than SEO results for a lot of queries have become much less visible than they were back in 2004. So, all of these changes, thinking about things from an SEO point of view, what does that mean for us as SEO people, as SEO professionals? Well, as I said at the beginning, I think, it's important to remember that actually, the fundamental principle deep underneath this thing is still PageRank, and that still exists, that's still the case. But the details of how Google execute that and how we take advantage of that as SEOs has, changed almost beyond recognition. If you look at this here, this is a search engine watch logo that is basically a detail of all of the Google algorithm updates from 2003 all the way through to last year. And you'll see there's dozens and dozens of them, and most of these individual updates have multiple iterations. I think for me, the first one I remember, and in some ways the most seismic one at the time, was Florida, and I think that was probably significant because that was the first update that Google implemented that was specifically targeted at cleaning up the results from SEO activity. I think that was the very beginning of the SEO industry in terms of some of the dirty, nasty, black hat, spamming type techniques. That was the time some of those techniques were beginning to bear fruit. And Florida was really the first update specifically targeted on cleaning up the results, if you like, after that. Other significant results, if you look at Jagger, that was their first attempt to clean up on paid links, and sort of what they would say were spurious examples of link building. In 2009, you've got Vince, which was an update designed to reward bigger brands. So that was kind of significant because that was really, I think, the beginning of the end for small and niche focused online only businesses to be able to compete with big brands on an even playing field where Google is concerned. I think this was the point at which Google decided actually the Google results page should probably look more like the high street in terms of the sorts of brands that were on it. And then later, 2011 and onwards, we got the Panda and the Penguin updates that we've all come to know and love and be scared of over time, and that are still here and still evolving. Interestingly, the latest iteration of Penguin is out, and Google have just announced that actually that is now going to be a continually evolving update, if you like, that's just going to roll out over time rather than an update that's released and then status quo until another update. It's going to be more of a state of flux. But you'll see, there's massive evolution, and has been massive evolution in the way that Google runs its algorithm. So I thought it might be fun as well to look at what we were doing as SEOs. Some of the things that we were doing in 2004, and some of the things that we're doing now, and how they've evolved. So this is a screenshot from 2004 from a product called TextLink Ads. I don't know if anyone in the room remembers TextLink Ads. It was basically a link buying exchange, and it was a hugely popular product at the time. If you were a website owner, you could put your website onto this exchange and you could sell links on your website through TextLink Ads. They were a broker, essentially. If you were an SEO, you could buy links through TextLink Ads. The very principle of buying links at all is, of course, anathema to us as SEOs now. It's absolutely not something that we would do. But back in 2004, everyone was using this thing, and it worked. And it's just an example of how things have completely changed. Another example in much the same vein, there are all sorts of things doing this doorway page or gateway page generators. So if you've got a website that you can't get indexed in Google for any reason, maybe you've got a really complicated CMS that has some issues that you can't fix, Google doesn't like it, actually this sort of stuff said, hey, actually you don't need to do that, you don't need to fix the issues. If you want to get that page to rank better, we'll auto-generate some spam pages for you, basically. And again, they worked. But again, it's absolutely not something that, any responsible SEO would encourage at all these days. So, things everyone were doing in 2004, everyone was buying links. It was just a fact of life. I was in 2004, I was buying links. I think anyone who was doing this stuff back then was. We were doing all sorts of other nasty things that Google would specifically discourage now. We were buying site-wide links. We were putting in place links that were stuffed full of keyword anchor text. Again, really bad practice now, but it's a fact. It was a fact of life back then. Text links embedded in widgets, all sorts of stuff. What does that mean? Actually, if you have a website now, or you inherit a website now, that you find all of this stuff in, I don't think it means that, whoever was running the SEO for that website was a dirty, filthy spammer. Actually, I think it means, it was just it's a website with some age, a domain with some age, and there's some SEO history there. I think for us as SEOs today in 2014, what it probably means is that the starting point, if you're working on a site or a domain with some age, the starting point is looking at, what the history of the SEO activity and the link building activity in particular has been on that website. So, almost before you start looking at proactive SEO, my advice would be, your starting point is perform a backlink audit and see how much of that sort of rubbish, frankly, still exists, and potentially get rid of that using the disavow function. There's all sorts of technology that can help you do that. We've got some technology of our own that we've built at Barracuda, but there's also quite a few commercial products out there that can help you streamline that process. But I think ultimately there's no substitute for manually reviewing each and every backlink that the website has got, which of course is a tedious and lengthy process potentially, but I think is something that is good to do. Will bear fruit for you. I also think, in terms of differences between 2004 and 2014, it's interesting to look at what SEO consisted of. And I think back in 2004, SEO definitely existed in its own little silo, if you like. There were people whose job function in a business was SEO, and that's what they did. They did nothing else, and they didn't touch on anything else. And what did 2004 SEO consist of? Well, it consisted of let's target our keywords, let's decide what keywords we want, let's make sure Google can crawl our website, let's get some links in that target those keywords, and let's get some rankings. It is relatively discrete and relatively simple, and SEO could sit in its own little silo, if you like, apart from other marketing activity. If you compare and contrast that with how things look today, actually the old story of SEO existing in its own little vacuum, I think, is probably over. There's all sorts of blurred lines between, PR, social activity, site, things like site speed, are specifically part of Google's algorithm. Things like mobile friendliness of your website are specifically flagged up by Google as being significant from a rankings perspective. There's all of this stuff, design, UX, the lines between SEO and other parts of the digital marketing function and the web function in a business have blurred. So I think the old days of, an SEO guy sitting in a corner and not talking to anyone are probably gone. You know, you've got to look at all of this stuff as part of the mix, if you like. So, you know, what does that mean for us? I think, you know, firstly, it means if you've got site level issues, you know, address them. Don't try and hide them with bridging pages or doorway pages or anything like that. Take them on. You know, there's all sorts of really good site crawler technology out there, things like Screaming Frog that can help you identify site level issues from an SEO perspective. I would definitely say use them and fix any issues that they identify. And it really is about content. You know, you can't expect to go to an SEO conference these days, can you, and not hear the word content. I'll try not to bang on about it, but, you know, actually, you know, it really is about that. And I think it's also about working on areas and taking advantages of things that actually didn't exist at all in 2004. And if you look at things like mobile, you know, I remember back in 2004, everyone was saying, oh yeah, next year is going to be the year of mobile. And it took about 7 or 8 years, really, to get to that point. You know, it didn't really exist in 2004. Things like personalisation definitely didn't exist. So the whole concept of being signed into Google and me being signed in, seeing different results to you when you're signed in, has, of course, had a huge impact on SEO, but, you know, it didn't exist back then. And also the whole area of markup, you know, the most prominent possibly being things like product reviews. You know, really powerful tools for us as SEOs now, but they were simply not in existence back then. What shouldn't we be doing? We definitely shouldn't be doing stuff like that. We definitely shouldn't be doing some of this, you know, there's a whole bunch of directories here. Again, you know, you probably remember the £99 a month, all the directories you can eat type SEO packages that you could get back in the day. And some of these, you know, some of these are still around. I think even the Yahoo directory only closed down very, very recently. But we just shouldn't be doing that. It doesn't have a place anymore. Super thin content. So, you know, you get these sorts of pages. We know auto insurance in Houston. We know auto insurance in Dallas, in Los Angeles, in Boston. You know, same sort of thing. Minimal changes. Just don't do it. It doesn't work. And I think equally significantly, you know, what we also shouldn't be doing is using key phrases as our success metric. So, you know, again, you remember the old ranking reports where we could give ourselves a pat on the back if we'd moved up one place for one key phrase. I think probably those days are gone. Certainly Google, from an analytics perspective, of course, with the whole not provided thing, has helped us steer away from the whole concept of using key phrases to measure our success or otherwise in SEO. You know, obviously back in the day, you know, we were able to see exactly which key phrases were sending organic search traffic into our website. Now, that's not possible. So I think, you know, actually we're forced to measure our success by means other than rankings. So, you know, things like, if you're looking at an analytics point of view, things like top content from analytics, your most popular pages are a much more valid success metric than rankings are these days. I think we should, you know, as we mentioned earlier, I think we should be paying proper attention to site level SEO, but I think, you know, we should be really focused on this proper editorially or content, to use that horrible word, driven link acquisition. So I thought it would be interesting to look at, you know, a couple of examples of what makes good content. You know, I've talked quite a lot about what we were doing back in the day that we shouldn't be doing anymore. But I thought it might be interesting to look at the sort of things that do work now. At Barracuda, we've got 4 rules that we look at when we're building content or developing content, either on our own or with our clients. And they're pretty simple, but, you know, I kind of think if you've got a piece of content that complies with this, you know, generally you're not far off from having something that can deliver some results for you. It's got to be on brand. You know, that kind of goes without saying that if you're working for, you know, a 250-year-old lending institution, you can't be putting up crazy, wacky content. It's got to be evergreen. And by that, I mean, you know, it's probably, you know, it's best to steer away from developing a piece of content that's really got one use or one execution and then it's done. You know, the best sort of content from an SEO point of view is stuff that you can recycle, stuff that has data that you can slice and dice in multiple ways. And that helps the life of it, but it also helps this. It helps it be outreachable to multiple sectors and multiple places. And also, kind of obvious, I guess, but it's got to be better than anyone else's. If you're developing a content on a certain theme, you want it to be more compelling than other content on that theme. So an example of that we've developed at Barracuda is for a client of ours called Musement.com. Basically, they are Europe's biggest provider of guided tours. So if you go on a holiday and you want to go to Rome and you want a guided tour of the Colosseum, for example, Musement are the place to go. They're really great. But one of the things we did is, because they're effectively a tourism business, so they're very geographically focused, we looked at geographical ideas, and that sort of led naturally to mapping as a theme for developing content around. We came up with this idea of basically building a map of where every film you could ever think of and has ever been made was filmed. So we've got this gigantic database of filming locations. We've overlaid that into a map, and there's various filters that we've applied. So if you want to know where the last Bond film was filmed, you can do that. If you want to look at disaster movies, you can do that. There's some really popular. Where is the Bridge on the River Kwai filmed? Sri Lanka is the answer, by the way. But that's a really good example of a piece of content that complies with those previous lines. It fits with the client. We can slice and dice it multiple ways, so you can take it to multiple people. And also, it's just really interesting. And that's been hugely successful for these guys. It's got some links from the Telegraph. Actually had a really nice article about them in the Telegraph. So, great from a link building point of view, but also great for them as a brand, and has delivered a fair amount of ongoing incoming traffic for them. Another example is actually the tool for Barracuda that I talked about earlier, the Penguin tool. Actually we developed that as a resource for SEOs and for webmasters, but actually, kind of by accident, if I'm honest, rather than by design. It's also been incredibly successful for us from a link generation point of view. The domain that it sits on has actually got, knocking on the door of 1,000 domains linking into that now, just because people are referencing it as being a useful, helpful tool from an SEO point of view. And also, another thing I was doing, I wanted to show you, one of the challenges, I think it's sometimes hard to get around when you're creating content, is, if you've got a product that isn't that interesting, or an offering that you might think, okay, it's quite limited, how do we make interesting stuff out of it? We've got a client, for example, that they sell caravan insurance, which, has got to be right up there with the dullest product in the world. It's very important if you're a caravaner, but, if you're not, it's quite hard to make it interesting. So we came up with this content here. So you can see exactly what it is. It's just a caravan being spray painted by a load of graffiti artists. But actually, they were really well-known graffiti artists, and it enabled us to take that piece of content and take the client's website, therefore, to places that, frankly, we couldn't have taken a very interesting article about caravan insurance to. So, that's the sort of example of, how creativity, I guess, can help you from an SEO point of view. So, just to sum up, what's the key takeaway, hopefully, out of all of this? For me, I think, almost the biggest one is this, be pragmatic. If you're dealing with a website that's been around for a while, it's going to have some history. Like I say, it doesn't mean that they're all dirty, horrible spammers who were working on your website before. But, I think it is important to recognise that there will be activity that's there from history that we probably need to get rid of or disavow now. And I think, actually, the basic way, the basic fundamental principle underneath Google is still the same. You know, PageRank still exists, but the way we get to it, the way they execute against that is really, really different. And finally, you know, what shouldn't we be doing in 2014? I think the one thing that we definitely need to remember is there's absolutely no need for any human sacrifice whatsoever where SEO is concerned. And that is me. Thank you very much indeed.
Cheers, thank you very much. Has anyone got anything